Welcome to the Indigenous Event Recordings Podcast. My name is Tsosie. I'm the person behind the camera. I'm here with Emerald Arnold and her son, JL. We're going to be talking about Emerald's life, her children, military service, and being a powwow mom. And really excited to hear it. I've been thinking about this nonstop. And I don't know if you want to introduce yourself to the camera. Look at that main one, the big one right there.
I just turned 45. I currently work at Northern Arizona University in the Office of Indigenous Student Success with Student Affairs as a student development coordinator. I started in this role almost 2 years ago, and I started at NAU in 2023. Have 5 kids. Married, my husband and I have been married for 21 years. We're both prior military. We both, my husband did 20 years and retired, and I was in for 23 years. We live here now in Flagstaff. We retired out of San Diego. We were there I was there for about 20 years. I think he's there just a little bit shy of 20 years. Actually, I think I was there for 22 years.
What year did you guys get married?
We got married in 2005, March 7th of 2005. It's kind of a funny story, actually, because we were on the same ship together in San Diego, and I had gotten to the ship in I think fall of 2004, and they had just gotten back off of deployment. And so they got back off deployment in October of 2004. And I think in November, we were in the same department, different divisions. I worked aviation ordnance. And so I was in the weapons department, what we call the magazine division. So I worked with maintaining and kind of like storing weapons on the ship. And so he worked in the armory as a gunner's mate. And so we were in the same department, but different divisions. And I think I knew of him early on. I didn't really know him. I kind of stuck more to the people that I worked with. And then we went to a school together, and I remember him saying something just kind of like off the, like just off the wall. And I was like, what the heck? Like, what are you saying? Like, why would you say something, kind of dumb like that, and didn't really like him after that. I was like, oh, that guy's freaking, in my house, we say juice bag. So I'm like, oh, that guy's a juice bag, and so that was in like November. In December, we had a Christmas party, or a departmental Christmas party. And at the time I was living in San Marcos, which is like 40 minutes north of San Diego. And that was where our Christmas party was. And I was getting ready to go home to Kayenta that weekend. And so we went to a Christmas party, and he was at the same party, and we got to, just kind of chatting off, kind of away from everyone. And he likes to tell people that he drove a Lincoln Mark 7. I can't remember the year, but he drove a Lincoln Mark 7, and he likes to tell people that it was his 396 spokes that caught my attention, because he was missing 4 spokes in his
his nice car,
in his what do you call those? His rims. And so yeah, I mean, we, exchanged phone numbers, kind of chatted, but, texted back and forth every now and then. At the time, this was in 2004, we didn't have cell service on the reservation. So as soon as we left Flagstaff, and got kind of into Gray Mountain, we would lose service. And so, I'd go home to Kayenta and wouldn't have any, really no connection to the world until, we got back into like the Flagstaff Gallup range. And so, I got back and had a couple messages from him that Christmas of 2004 into New Year's of 2005. And, we kind of got to talking a little bit more. Fast forward February, we dated for a couple of weeks, and then in March we got married. So it was kind of a quick,
whoa,
yeah. And that was 21 years ago. So 21 years. and here we are.
And how long from your first marriage to your first child?
Oh, so when I married James, I had 2 kids, Quana and Adrienne, and those relationships, just didn't pan out with their dads. And when I met James, we had talked about obviously the kids, because we did get married pretty quick. I think we dated for maybe 2 weeks before we got married. And so he knew, early on that he was going to be taking on, a role that, he obviously wasn't familiar with. And so we had a lot of growing pains early on in our relationship. And, kind of worked through them together. We got married in March of 2005, and we had JL in December of 2005. So do the math. We had gotten, pregnant early on. And when after, getting married, we had JL, and then, not maybe a couple of years, 2-3 years after that, we had Ashlyn. She was born in 2008. And then, between commands and just kind of working and getting, kind of switched around, I was worried about, I wanted to have another child not too long after Ashlyn, and I was worried about schools that I wanted to go to and just kind of opportunities that I didn't want to miss out on. So we didn't have AJ until 2014. Right. Yeah. So 2008, September 7. Yeah. 2008 to 2014. We have a little bit of a gap between the kids. So I waited until I was kind of settled in my job, before we had AJ. So there's a little bit of a gap, but yeah, we have 5 amazing kids.
That Barona t-shirt is one of my favorite t-shirts. I try not to wear it.
That's so great to hear. Yeah, that was a really great design.
I see Trevor Foster always posting in the Head Boy Special t-shirt. He'll post a selfie and he's wearing it. I'm like, it's going to be all gray at the end of the year.
All faded.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great design by Suya Davis, who put something together for us for that special.
Did he base that off of one of my photos?
I think he did. It was either your photo or it was a photo of Yoshi Begay, who is out of...
I think he lives somewhere in LA.
Yeah, the California area. Really good family.
California circuit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think that particular photo, I want to say might have been out of Fredonia. One of the first years that we were out here in. That's
the one by the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
I haven't been there.
Up north, Yoshi, and I think Bear Springs was the host drum up at Fredonia Powwow, and Yoshi was there with the camera. So I want to say that's where that photo was from.
Yoshi's pretty cool.
Yeah, he's a great photographer. He's gotten a
Is he
lot
better
of
than
great
me?
I mean, you're kind of both neck and neck when it comes to you both have like your niche, the things that y'all are good at.
I don't ever get feedback for anything, so I just go out there and make mistakes. So I have no idea. No one ever tells me, unless like I do something really bad, like by accident, and sometimes I get pointed out. But
yeah,
I remember one comment was like 2-3 years ago. It was Apache Gold, I believe, and it was something like, your camera's too shaky. You have to stop. You have to like make it more stable. And I was like, how do I do that? And that's when I got my first tripod.
Oh, nice.
So all this accessories and camera equipment that I have, it's all just making one small mistake every single weekend and learning from it and thinking about it, researching and finding the right product and purchasing it.
I think that that's just the culture, this kind of, there's all those memes that are like, Indigenous people never say like, oh, you look nice, or they look at you and they're like, where are you going? Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see that.
They're not going to be like, oh, that's a really good picture. And be like, hey, like the camera's shaky, knock it off.
How many powwows do you think you've been to with all of your kids? Have you been to a powwow by yourself?
No, I don't think I have. So I grew up, powwowing. My dad was a Northern traditional dancer. And, from the time, I have a buckskin dress that I wore, that my sisters wore, and that I kind of want to try to get cleaned up and restored and maybe possibly framed, because it has some like ketchup stains on the underdress. But I just being powwow kids, I think that's normal. But so I grew up going to powwows. We all summer, that's all we did. We slept in tents. We went from powwow to powwow, using, prize money to get from one powwow to another. Kind of how, people talk about it today. I think back then it was a little bit more primitive, this was like maybe 30, 40 years ago. And, I remember going places where they didn't even have like a PA system. And you just kind of went off of, just an arbor. There wasn't canopies that are, that go up today. Yeah. And I don't even think I really sat down anywhere and today we have all these like umbrella chairs and all these, camper director chairs, and we didn't have that kind of stuff back then. I think I sat on the ground. Yeah. Sat on the ground, or I was running around. And so, when my kids, we started to really get into powwow in Southern California. We had met Chuck Cadot and Carla Torville. And then eventually the D Cranes. But we kind of got involved in that circuit, and out there, just about every day of the week, there was a different dance class somewhere in the county in San Diego. And so, we got involved there, and that really kind of helped me to, harness, I think, these, like layman talents that had just been kind of dormant for a little bit. I got more into making regalia, doing beadwork, and making sure my kids have, what they need when they go out into the arena, and they really teaching them the things that I was taught, take care of your regalia. It doesn't matter where you go. If you take care of your regalia, you break it out, you use it, you're going to get a meal. Some of the powwows will have a feed. Even if we don't walk away with prize money, we had a good meal, shared some time with family, and maybe met some new people. But, that's, it. So this was in 2017, 2018 that we started out in Southern California. And it's just been kind of going since then. They've come a long way in, what they do, how they dance, the things that they've been taught. And so to answer your question, no, I haven't been to a powwow by myself. I think sometimes I think about that, I think about when the kids, James and I are getting older, and kids are getting older. And so we think about that empty nesting. I think about that empty nesting, like, what's it going to be like? And my hope is that, we come into some grandkids at some point, and I don't have to go to powwows by myself. And so kind of banking on these, these kids to give me some grandkids. So we'll, just kind of see how that goes. But it's been fun so far, just learning. Sometimes it can be a little stressful. I really enjoy out here these social powwows that we're able to go to and be a part of because there's so much less stress. We get into these contest powwows, these bigger powwows, and it becomes, we got to get there by a certain time. We got to be ready by a certain time. Ashland's been royalty for the past 2 years. And so that can be a little bit stressful, just kind of the expectations. But yeah, otherwise we're here for it.
Have you ever had a royalty? I was going to ask you if you've ever been a princess.
Oh no,
you just support Ashland.
Yeah. When I was, growing up, we were at powwows all the time. My dad died when I was 13. He died in 1994, and that really just kind of rocked me to my core. I kind of just, I didn't know, what to do and how to kind of go on. I think losing my dad back then, I had a lot of hurt and a lot of anger and a lot of just kind of, not quite understanding, I guess, purpose. Why was this person brought into my life and then taken out so abruptly? Or why did this person, give me life and then was taken away so abruptly? And so there, I had a lot of, frustrations with religion. I don't think I ever once questioned the power of spirituality because we were brought up so, in that realm. I think it was more about religion that I had a hard time with. And so, 13, we stepped away from powwows. I think we had gone to a couple after just kind of memorial powwows, where my brothers, one of my brother Brian, my dad's stuff was passed down to him. And we just kind of dabbled, just kind of went to some stuff. And so I didn't, after the age of 13, I kind of went every now and then, but it wasn't really like super, super involved. And then, after I started having kids, I would take them to powwows every now and then in, Barona, Saquon, when we were in Southern California before they started dancing. And I knew, one of my kids, we went to, I want to say it was Saquon one year before they had it where they have it now. And my one of my kids, they're like, look at all those Indians. And I was like, oh my gosh, like they have no idea, who they are. Mm-hmm. And I really kind of took that like, man, like how, and I remember buying my first jingle dress. This was in like, we were still in it was probably like 2011, 2012. I had bought my first jingle dress, and I think I bought it off like eBay or something. This was when like Facebook was starting to kind of like people would post, it might've been like Craigslist or eBay or something like that. Facebook Marketplace wasn't a thing. There wasn't these big powwow pages on social media. And I want to say it might've been through eBay that I bought this jingle dress. And my niece has it now. My brother's Brian's daughter, Gabby. And I held on to that thing for, I don't even know how many years before we gave it to her. But that was kind of like my hope, like, we're going to do this. I just don't know when, and I don't know how. And, I think Chuck and Carla, just having those moments with them. I think JL was the first set of regalia that I had bought, from Pow-wow Fabrics. And I kind of built off of that. It was just, the yoke, the aprons, and I think some cuffs. And then I had put together some other accessories for him. And kind of just, that was like the jump start. We had gone to Riverside Powwow that year. I think this was probably 2017, 2018. And bought his headband from a vendor. And then, crazy enough, probably 5 years later, 5, 6, 7 years later, we saw the same vendor at Barona, and we were able to trade because the same vendor had the belt that matched the headband that we had bought, 5-6 years before. And at this point, James had started making belts, regalia belts. Him and the boys, they would put belts together. And so we were able to trade 2 of his regalia belts that just had conchos on them for that beaded belt that the guy hadn't sold in,
years.
5-6 years. He's still holding on to it. And there was a matching medallion too that I wish we, had the money at the time to get. But, so yeah, we, that kind of put together some of his regalia, and we're working on other things for him. But that was kind of like the jump start into, making their regalia and learning different things. James had bought me a serger, sewing machine, and that was, that it really helped also, kind of helped me hone my craft a little bit. And, one of my aunts, she's always telling me like, oh, you're a seamstress. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I can just sew in a straight line, I can sew in a straight line. I can backstitch. I can use these zigzags, and that's about it. That's all, all I've got in my repertoire. So, but yeah, I've gotten into making regalia for them, bigger pieces, made some shawl outfits for Ashlyn. I make the outfits for my boys. They're both grass dancers. And so, at some point hope to teach them a little bit about that. But my mom's mom, all seamstresses. And I don't think of myself in that realm. I don't even like to use that word. But,
you just have a sewing machine.
I have a sewing machine and I can sew in a straight line. And I'm pretty meticulous. I've always been very meticulous and kind of detail oriented. So I think that really helps too. But yeah, that's our journey.
What were your parents like? What are their names?
So my mom's name was Angelita. She's a gold tooth. She's from Tuba City area. Eventually her dad, my Che, he moved to Saley, and so he has a homestead. He had a homestead out in Saley. My parents are gone. My grandparents are gone, and so Gold Tooth is out of Tuba City. My mom's also a yellow hair. I don't know if you're familiar with that Van's Trading Post, that road going into Tuba City from I can't remember what highway it is, 160 maybe. The road going into Tuba City from Cameron. There's
JL, pull it up.
There's the dinosaur tracks, as you get closer to Tuba City. And then there's the Van's Trading Post. So my mom's mom is from the north side of that highway. Mm-hmm. And then my mom's dad is from the south side of that little highway that runs through Tuba City. And so that's where my mom's from. Her 160. Yeah. Her mom, well, we're, Tudness Ethne is our clan. So the Tangle People clan, which kind of, fits with the, being a seamstress and, being able to do my mom's mom, her grandma, they were all weavers in the Tuba City area. And so it was nice to learn a little bit about that stuff. I've learned more about that in the last few years, my mom's side of the family. And my dad's name was Pat Quiver. He was a teacher. We were, I was born and raised in kind of the Fort Defiance, Window Rock area. My dad taught there for a long time. And then he did, he coached baseball, he coached football out in that area this was in the 80s, 80s, 90s. We were out in that area, and he was just, to me, he was my hero, and I know, there's times where I have to remind myself that he was human too. We lived the powwow life. We lived the sports life. He was, all about sports, academics, powwow. We were also a pretty, heavy going church family, back then. And so, yeah, so my dad, he was actually born in Phoenix. His dad was in the Air Force. And so he was born in Phoenix, lived a little bit in Chinle, and that's how he met my mom. And funny thing, my parents met when they were in the 5th grade in Chinle. My grandpa, my mom's dad, was the chief of police in Chinle, and they were both living there, both going to school. And so my parents met in the 5th grade, and my dad told my mom in the 5th grade that he was going to marry her someday, which is kind of crazy because I look at my own kids and I'm like, would you ever say that to somebody?
JL, have you ever said that?
Have you ever said tell somebody you're going to marry them someday? And it's just this weird chain of events, when my parents were older and they kind of, their paths crossed again. My mom was actually a police dispatcher in the Fort Defiance area. And my grandpa, my dad's dad, had an accident up near Acai Lake. He was taking some Boy Scouts on a trip, and he had had a massive heart attack and passed away. And my mom was the one that took the call. And so, their paths crossed again at that time. And then, just kind of after that, it was just kind of, they had gotten together, and, they started a family, it's where all my siblings and I come in. But yeah, my parents were, back, early on growing up when my dad was alive, we had, we lived life. My dad was the primary breadwinner, I guess you could say, for the family. My mom was a homemaker. She took care of us, she took care of the house, made sure we always had something to eat. And, that was kind of like just life in Fort Defiance, just running around, getting dirty, playing outside, coming home, eating, and, going to bed. And then, doing it all over again. But we didn't have much, but, what we didn't have, I don't think that we missed, because we just didn't know that, it was there. It's funny. I'm actually, in a master's of social work program right now. And one of my courses that I'm taking is the Cultural Foundations of Education. And I had to do I had to write a paper on a intersectional autobiography. And one of the questions was, what was your social class or, socioeconomic class, growing up? And when did you become aware of your class, your socioeconomic status growing up? And for me, it was in middle school. I didn't realize that we didn't have a lot of money until I was in middle school. And I had just started volleyball at Canton Middle School. I think it's called something different now, but I had just started volleyball at Canton Middle School, and I had gotten a brand new pair of, the Avia volleyball shoes. And I was so excited because, we didn't really get new shoes, for specific things. Like we got new shoes, most of the time it was tribal clothing. We'd get a new pair of shoes with tribal clothing. And so we didn't really get new stuff like that. And I was so excited. And then I get to volleyball practice and the girls, they start pointing at my shoes and laughing. And Kayenta at the time was a coal mining town. We had Peabody up. And so a lot of the kids that I went to school with, their parents were coal miners, and they made good money. My dad was a school teacher. He didn't make a lot of money. And we didn't have, we had what we had. We had what we needed. And so, they're laughing, pointing at my shoes, and I'm looking at their shoes, and they're wearing, brand new Nikes and, these brand name shoes. And I'm like, I felt embarrassed, that at that time. And I really, writing this paper on my intersectional autobiography, really just kind of brought all that stuff back up for me. Holy cow, just really going back and thinking about those times in my life that, my parents really valued more, connection, our spirituality, the things that we did celebrate. Yeah, we didn't have, I think there was one summer, where we were in between. My dad wasn't working in a school system. And so we stayed that summer in my grandpa's hogan in Salee. And, you know, it was hogan life, you know, it was just one big room and we were just all in there. I remember that summer, my dad spent a lot of time doing beadwork, just kind of working on his regalia. We were, you know, back and forth to different powwows. And I want to say this might've been the summer before he died, if not the summer before, summer of 93, that we did this. And, you know, we were out with livestock every day, just kind of, you know, running around my grandpa's fields. So, you know, my parents really didn't put a lot of value in material things. And I'd like to say that that's kind of how I am now. I do like nice things. But I don't put a lot of value in them. I think to me, the things, especially the things that I have that my parents used to have, you know, I put a lot more value in those things. And those are the things I want to hold on to. Like I could get rid of a lot of stuff, like just stuff that I have laying around the house. And throw that away. Yeah. Don't look it back. Don't look behind you. But when it comes to those things that have a sentimental value, I hold on to a little bit longer.
My brother's like that. He'll just take a trash bag and just sweep everything in there.
I want to do that to this. Just ball it up and throw everything away.
Yeah. The only thing I value is cameras. Like everything else, I don't care about cars. I don't care about sports. I don't care about what's on TV. When I go home, all I watch is just YouTube videos on camera reviews and trying to stay up to date what's coming up next.
You watch Indigenous Event Recordings.
I watch my own videos. I study my own videos. I wait for myself to make mistakes.
That's good. That's good.
Take little mental notes.
Yeah.
On how I can be better. But it was so hot at Dobson High School. That was such a hot powwow.
Dobson was hot.
And Westwood was a little bit easier because I had the option to sit in the shade with the MC. But the Dobson High School was so hot.
Yeah. Yeah. I was the head woman for that powwow. And it was nice to get back into, you know, some responsibilities with the powwow. And then, Westwood, Ashland was the head woman. So it was hot. I during my special, I had, I did the contest. I opted to do a contest instead of a giveaway, for that powwow. And so I did, juniors, you know, 7 and under, and then teens and then the women's categories. And, one of the teens actually left, as they were lining up, to, step aside. She wasn't feeling well and she started throwing up. And so we tried to get her some electrolytes and some, you know, so Dobson was hot. And I don't think, you know I wasn't prepared for that heat this early on in the year.
Yeah. I was filming and then I just left the camera in the sunlight just to see like how long it'll, record until it gets too hot, but the whole time it was fine. Nice. But I was hot. So I left the camera in the sunlight and then I just go sit down with the MCs and just cool off and try to stay as cool as possible. I didn't want to, stay heat exhausted the entire day.
Yeah. I don't know how you do it. I couldn't do it.
At the Standing Horse Route 66 powwow 3 years ago, I think was my first time, 3 summers ago. I knew with my camera to sit opposite of the sun in the circle. So if the sun's over here, here's the circle. I'd be on the other side looking towards the sun just for like a more beautiful image. And I was doing that the whole day. Of course I was hot, but I was also wearing like a t-shirt at the time. And I actually got some sunspots in my hands that first summer. So that's why I wear the green button up all the time, just just to be recognizable. Yeah. And also to keep the sun off my skin because I'll just be sitting there the whole time. I also got some on my face, like on my cheekbones right here, some sunspots.
Yeah, there's some zinc on that
skin. I'll just leave the camera out there and just I want to find a way to control it like powwows.com, but I also don't want to use a webcam.
Yeah.
just some things that I think about and more expensive purchases to make in the future, just so I can sit in the shade and control the camera from the sunlight.
Yeah. We have to get you an umbrella.
I have sun umbrellas. I have a little travel one, and then I have like a really big one that reflect the heat. It doesn't allow the heat to come down. If you're using the umbrella, it doesn't allow the heat to come down and boil your head. Oh, nice. The rain umbrellas will do that, but not the sun umbrellas. The sun umbrellas. But this button up is falling apart. I'm missing buttons. I only got one around my belly now. I had two. Yeah. And yesterday it popped off. And then same thing with my jeans. Like my jeans are from Costco. They're like $25, but I keep ripping them at the knees. I'll be standing there and I'm like, oh, image. And then I'll just drop to my knees and I keep ripping them at the knees.
That's funny.
And my shoes, just whatever shoes.
Yeah. We know the Aaron uniform.
How long have you lived here? It's a nice house.
Thank you. So we bought, I started working here in Flagstaff at NEU in January of 2023. I think January 30th is the day that I started. And so back a little bit. Let me throttle back a little bit. So I retired in September of 2022. I was on active duty for 23 years. And when I retired, we were trying to, prior to retirement, we were trying to sell the house we lived in Ramona, California. It's, what's considered North County of San Diego. And so we had a beautiful home there. We had kind of really set some roots down in Ramona. And, James and I were a little bit worried about what, our income was going to look like after retirement and, where we're going to have to go back to work, things like that. And so, after we retired, I did a little bit of work, at the elementary school in Ramona. I worked as a para educator. So I worked with the special needs students in the special needs classroom and I loved it. And I kind of got like a little glimpse into the life of like school social work. And had already kind of been like, maybe I want to, get into a graduate program. But was really just I think I had just graduated right before I retired with my bachelor's. It took me 19 years to finish my bachelor's program. And so I graduated with my bachelor's. Jeez. JL, close the door.
It's so loud.
So I graduated with my bachelor's in psychology. And I had a minor in sociology right before retirement. That was one of my big goals before retirement, was to get my degree. And I also wanted to graduate before my oldest son graduated from college. He was in his third year in 2022. And so I got my degree. I started working as a paraeducator. Was kind of like, maybe I could get into school social work or just social work in general. So I only worked there at the school for a few months. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I fell in love with those kids. They just, brought a different perspective, I think, to life and the things that a lot of people really take for granted. And so I really just enjoyed, I think, kind of their innocence and just the power that they have, just having special needs, and having to live a different lifestyle than most people do. And so I think we were on like Christmas break it was sometime in December. I actually forgot that I had filled out a couple applications with NEU. And, no one was really biting. A lot of people were, when I was in the military, I did drug and alcohol counseling for the last probably 11 years that I was in the military. And that I was trying to look for jobs in that realm with drug and alcohol counseling. I love it. I just love doing that kind of work. And so I was looking for work like that. Couldn't find anything. And everybody's like, oh, you need a graduate degree. And I'm like, oh, I don't have that. So So just kind of looking for little things. Is how I got into the school doing that kind of work. And so NAU had called me. One of the representatives from the Office of Indigenous Student Success, she had called and said, hey, we got your application. Are you still interested in interviewing for this position? And I was like, what? Like, what in the world? Like, oh my gosh. And, I kind of like just got all excited because we had taken the house off the market. We're like, oh, maybe we'll just stay here, And I'm like, put the house back on the market, call the realtor, got really excited. And so, yeah, I took the opportunity. I interviewed with the Office of Indigenous Student Success, got through the first round, got to the second round. They called me back and said, hey, we want to offer you a position. And I was like, oh my gosh, so I had to, put in my notice with the school. And then funny enough, a couple weeks later, the veteran program at NAU, the Veteran Military Services, I forgot I had put in an application with them. And so they called me and they're like, hey, we have this position, but it's in Tucson, at the NAU branch in Tucson. And I was like, I'm not going to Tucson. Do not want to go to Tucson, period. Really, the focus was trying to get the kids back here to Flagstaff or as close to the Navajo Reservation as we could get. I had applied to positions in Pinon. I applied to positions in Kayenta, Tuba City, trying to get to the reservation somehow. And I've actually talked with quite a few people who have experienced the same thing. They tell us, go get an education, go serve our country, come back and help your people. And I was trying to get a job out there and I could not get a job. And so that's when I was just like, you know what, like maybe it's just not the time, I took the house off the market. And then when NAU started calling, I was like, oh my gosh, we can get to Flag. At the time, my sister lived here. And so I was really excited to spend some time with my sister and her family. And so yeah, I took the position here at NAU. James, stayed behind with, I brought AJ out here with me. He started at an immersion school out here. It's called Puente de Hojo. And they, are a language immersion school. And so he had just kind of a Spartan kick into Navajo language. Because in the morning they teach in Navajo and then they transition to English in the afternoon. But really just kind of had a Spartan kick into that. So AJ and I came out here in January of 23. We stayed with my sister for a few months. Probably like 5 months we stayed with my sister. And then, I was teleworking for about a month. We finally closed on the house in Ramona, bought the house out here in, out here in Williams. We're on 10 acres right now. We've been here since, I think we closed in June of 2023. The weekend that we were in and out of Airbnbs for about 3 or 4 weeks out here, not, in Flagstaff, and then out here in Parks. Parks is not too far away from where we are. But we were, before we got into here, and then the weekend that we closed, I think on a Friday, we got the keys literally that morning. We had to unload we had movers that moved all of our stuff, but we had a lot of stuff that we had in the vehicles. And, we unpacked the vehicle, and that same weekend, JL and Ashlyn were head staff at a powwow in Imperial Beach it was Father's Day weekend. And so, we had to unpack the one ride and get it all cleaned out, get all the regalia put back in. And then, we got on the road and went down to San Diego, so they could, fulfill their duties. And then, James and AJ stayed here and, help the movers get everything moved into the house. So we were out in Imperial Beach for the weekend and came home, and I think we came home to like 3 or 4 2 or 3 dirt bikes, brand new dirt bikes that were sitting in the garage. And I was like, what the heck happened? James was like, oh, I went out and got us some dirt bikes. We got 10 acres now. And so, yeah, now we've just been, just chilling out here in Williams. It's really, it's a beautiful place. We National Geographic is right out in our front yard. You know, we look across the BLM land across the street that's empty, and we see elk, antelope. We have eagles that come.
That way?
Yeah, just straight out this dining room window here. Yeah, a lot of wildlife out here, and just a lot of peace and quiet. You know, a lot of stars. I think I might have been telling you, or I don't know who I was telling, but you know, every time we leave
lunch yesterday.
Yeah, lunch. Every time we leave the city limits of Flagstaff, you know, first thing AJ says is, "Mom, I can't see the stars." And so, yeah, just a lot of things are, you know, we go into the city and you know, AJ's like, "Oh, is it ever going to get quiet?" So it is really peaceful. It's really quiet out here. Yeah. It's a lot of fun. We like it.
Yeah, I know in Phoenix, whenever I do any like errands at night, whenever I step out of the car, I always look up at the sky and look at the stars and think to myself, "Oh, one day I'm gonna learn all these stars and the what are the shapes?"
Yeah, the constellations. Mm-hmm.
It's been a couple of years. I've never learned.
Yeah, we the kids actually have. At one point, they had a printed set of the constellations in Navajo.
Oh, really?
And we're gonna have to dig those out. They might still be packed up somewhere. We downsized when we moved here. We had in California, we had a 5-bedroom house. We had a 3,500 square foot house, and in that house, I had 2 living rooms. I had 2 kitchens, upstairs and a downstairs. And, you know, we get here and we didn't have that. And so half of our house is still kind of packed away. And over the last July, I bought cabinets, unfinished cabinets from Home Depot. And my project was going to be to put more storage in the house. And so I have cabinets on either side of the fireplace right now. I have cabinets here in the dining room that I'm still need to finish in between, you know, the graduate program that I'm in. I don't have a lot of time between powwows on the weekends and homework and all this stuff. And so my goal is to graduate in May and to finish my cabinets.
Do you have a photographer?
I do not have a photographer. I graduate on May 9th at 3 p.m. the Sky Dome.
Let me check my calendar.
I'm a photographer.
Oh, yeah, this is my photographer. Actually, I do have a photographer. But yeah, I'm excited. It's been a long 2 years. I actually started the program.
We might be in Disneyland that weekend. I don't know yet.
So I started my program. I originally started it in fall of 2024. And then I ended up having to defer for a year, just to kind of get some stuff situated. And so I started my program in fall of 25. And it's been a long 2 years. This particular program requires an internship every semester. And so 225 hours every semester for the last 2 years I've had to do internship hours. And so outside of my job, thankfully I have just such a great supportive network of strong, powerful, beautiful Indigenous women that I work with, who have supported me through this program, and kind of allowed me to work, go do my internship hours, and then come back and continue, to make up that time. So for the last,
Do you want to join us?
No, I'm good.
We got one more headphones.
James
good.
awake. So for the last 2 years, I've been working 12-hour days while I do 15 hours a week away from my office to do internship hours. I have to come back and make up my hours. And so I've been working 12-hour days, don't see the kids as much, haven't really been involved with them as much, really relying on James a lot for, cooking dinners and just kind of taking care of,
He's at the fridge right now.
Yeah. Taking care of the house and, trying to balance out, some of the things that I'm able to do and, just trying to be supportive of him too. But it's been a long 2 years and I'm happy. I'm ready for it to be to be done. I'm ready to walk across that stage and just kind of, have that degree, and also the, education and experience with the things that I've done in the last 2 years. Super, super happy, thankful. Last year I applied to the Pat Tillman Scholarship, and out of, I think the acceptance rate for that particular scholarship is like 1% out of, I think they said over 1,600 applicants. Wow. I think they chose 42. That my cohort that year, 2025 Tillman Scholar class, I was one of those 42. And, I was super, super honored. They take into consideration, not just, the work that we're doing in our programs, but, the work that we did, when we were in the military, and, how we continue to kind of, carry on Pat's legacy and what he stood for and continues to stand for, even in his death. Mm-hmm. So yeah, super honored to have had that opportunity. Yeah.
You mentioned something about, during your military service, you were doing the drug and alcohol counseling. Mm-hmm. I had a question in my head. I was wondering if you still think of like somebody. I just imagine you just sitting with somebody and talking to them about their problems. Is there somebody that you still think of today from that time? You said you did that for 11 years, right?
I did it for 11 years. There are a few patients, we call them patients, mm-hmm. Where I worked. A lot of places will say client. But there are a few patients that have stuck with me that I have remembered for whatever reason. And it's, I think more about the emotional connection that I was able to make with these people that mm-hmm. has kind of stood the test of time. Some of these people I worked with in the residential clinic when I first got into the program. So in 2010, 2011, I went to, we had a drug and alcohol program advisor. It was a DAPA program, and I was becoming a DAPA for my command. And as a DAPA, I was a liaison between, if anybody was having, problems with substances, I would have been the liaison between them and any support services that they received from the military. And when I went through that program, one of my instructors was a substance abuse counselor. And she talked about the program, and I was like, what in the world? Like, I didn't even know this thing existed. I didn't know that the Navy had treatment programs for active duty. I had no idea. And at the time, so this was in 2011, my mom had passed away in 2007, and she died from cirrhosis of the liver from excessive alcohol use. And in my mind at the time, one of my brothers had already been, in and out of treatment, was kind of, in and out of, being unsheltered and, just kind of living this kind of rough lifestyle, one of my brothers. And I remember thinking at the time, I'm going to go into this program and I'm going to save my brother. I'm going to learn what I need to learn to save my brother so that he doesn't die the way that my mom did. And that was my goal. That was my focus. And so at the time I was an E6, and I went to my command master chief. He was a senior enlisted leader, Senior Chief Weaver at the time. And I said to him, Senior, I want to do this program, and I need you to help me. And so because my detailer at the time, the person that was in charge of sending me to different, that was in charge of giving me orders, telling me, here, this is where you're going to go. He told me no. He said no, because he said, if you do this program, you're not going to advance. And I know that you want to advance. And I did. I wanted to be in khaki someday. I wanted to get promoted to E7. And they kept telling me, if you go into this program, it's kind of career. You're just gonna stay in the rank that you are right now. And so I said, I don't care. I want to do it. Thankfully, the command senior chief that I had worked with, my detailer, they were best friends. They were childhood best friends. And I said, Senior Chief Weaver, I need you to tell him to let me go. And I don't know what happened. Conversations were had. I don't know what happened. But I got released. And I was able to go back. At the time, it was a special program. It was considered a special program that I was going into. And so I went to school. I got approved. I went to school. And I can I cuss?
It's up to you. I don't care.
I kid you not. I won't cuss.
Probably for the best.
Yeah, I kid you not. I think the second day I was sitting in the classroom at the Navy Drug and Alcohol Counselor School in March of 2012. I was like, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to make it through this program because I had such, I think, rigid views, very rigid. I don't even know what the word is. Like, I just had this like perspective of life, and anything outside of that didn't make sense in my world
Sheltered
was wrong. And I don't know. I don't even know if it was sheltered. It was just like, I had a bunch of absolutes, and going into this program, I realized that I was just as unhealthy as my brother who was an alcoholic. I just had different behaviors. Mm-hmm. I just had different maladaptive behaviors that I had developed because of, my mom's addiction and, life after, my dad passed away. And so I think I was literally day 2 and I was like, I'm not going to make it through this program. Because the program required so much self-reflection and vulnerability, I didn't know if I was capable of that. And that day, I truly, truly understood what it meant to live or to be, to take things one moment at a time or one day at a time. For me in that course, it was literally, I just need to get through this next class to get to the next one. It was one class at a time. It was one journal entry at a time, one AA meeting at a time, because going through that course, it was essentially, it was an 11.5-week course. And it was essentially almost like going through an intensive outpatient treatment program because we had group therapy every day. We eventually learned how to facilitate that for each other, but we went to group therapy every day. We wrote in journals every day. We had to go to meetings throughout the week, self-help meetings. So AA, NA, Gamblers Anonymous. We had to go to just SMART meetings. We had to go to any and every. We went to Overeaters Anonymous meetings to understand more about that particular population. And so it was essentially going through treatment, and it really did. It really put a mirror up in front of me. One of the advisors in the class that I was in is Paula Wold, and she was just monumental in helping me understand more about my emotions enough to be able to be present in someone else's emotions. And so it was in that time that I learned that group therapy, with this emotional work, for me, it was like a playground. It was like, somebody crying was like swinging on this, being on a swing set. Somebody's anger was like going down the slide. Like, to me, it was like, okay, let's get in and do this work. And that's what I mean when, earlier when I had mentioned that, I love, the drug and alcohol counseling that I was doing because I had the opportunities to do that group therapy, individual therapy, the training that we go through to do the job that we did was very intense. And it was for very great purpose because we were being entrusted with, the raw human emotion, that people were willing to share with us. And I never took that lightly. And the skills that I learned in that program, I took it out into the world, went to the different duty stations that I went to, did what I could with what I had, and just kind of continue to work on those skills. And I still use those skills to this day, in the work that I do with students, in the work that I do, just with my kids, just being able to be present emotionally with my kids, I think is probably one of the greatest gifts that I ever could have been given from this course, this life-changing course that I went through, all those years ago, 14 years ago. I don't even remember what the question was, but
I don't remember either.
But it was just a, you asked me if any patient or, anybody that I had worked with had stuck with me. Yeah, absolutely. And especially those that, I had an emotional connection with that was tied to something else. That was tied to, maybe a sibling connection or something like that. I absolutely still do remember quite a few of the patients that I worked with back then. Prior to retirement, I actually went back to that same schoolhouse, the Navy Drug and Alcohol Counselor School, and became an instructor and an advisor there, and was able to take part in teaching, guiding, mentoring, advising prospective interns that were coming into that same program. And that was even more of just kind of a full circle experience where, that's where my life changed, and I wanted to kind of be a catalyst for that for somebody else.
I'm curious if there's so my dad passed away from drug abuse in 2018. Went to Vegas and he found somebody and did some dirty drugs, and it crystallized in his lungs. And when he got back from Las Vegas to Phoenix, my brother found him later that evening, the next morning. They got home about 7 a.m. and all day until like 10 p.m. or something late in the evening, my brother went into his room because two of them were living together at the time. And my brother knocked on his door, opened the door, and he was like, "Come eat." And found my dad was unresponsive and called 911. My mom was living really close. Yeah. And then they called me and they told me we called the ambulance and Dave wasn't responding and come over. And I was like, oh shit. And I went over and he was on life support for 10 days. And after that, we decided to unplug him and let him pass away. And because I have a large audience now, I'm just wondering, like, if there's a family out there who might have somebody who is struggling with drug and alcohol addiction, like, is there like a big company or organization that they can learn free information from, or that you're aware of? Like how can somebody with another family member who's struggling with addiction, how can they seek help for the family member?
I think, the first thing that came to my mind is Al-Anon. It's a self-help support group, kind of similar to Alcoholics Anonymous. Al-Anon is for the families of people who are addicted to drugs and alcohol. And Al-Anon really teaches a lot about how to set boundaries, how to maintain a healthy, pseudo-healthy relationship with someone who's not in a healthy place. Al-Anon is a really, really great resource. It's free. And really it's kind of like a scaffolding technique where there's people that have been in the program a really long time and they're like, oh, you know, this is what worked for me. And it's the same thing. They use the same principles as Alcoholics Anonymous. So Alcoholics Anonymous was started, you know, back in the mid 1900s. Bob and Bill, you know, were trying to find a way to get sober, and they knew they couldn't do it by themselves. And they created this fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. They created these principles to live by, these steps, these 12 steps. And so, you know, the first one being that, you know, I have to admit to someone, you know, that I'm powerless, to God or another person, that I'm powerless. I have to admit that I'm powerless. I have no power over this substance. And that's really one of the hard things to do. And so Al-Anon just kind of takes those and alters them to fit, you know, what it means to be a loved one of someone who's going through the throes, the battle of addiction. I would say that that's probably the first place that I would recommend that someone go to, is to learn more about not just, you know, what their loved one is going through, but like how it's impacting them. Mm-hmm. Because that's a huge piece. I remember when my brother first got, you know, he had just gotten out of treatment, and, you know, this was, you know, one of the treatment facilities that he went to, one of the many, had gotten out, and I was trying to support him. I didn't know how. This was before I went to the drug and alcohol counselor school. And I would go to him to meetings with him, to AA meetings with him. And I knew then that I had some unhealthy behaviors, and I just didn't know the extent of them. And, you know, we'd go around the room and do introductions, and, you know, hi, my name is, you know, so-and-so, and I'm an alcoholic. And, you know, everyone would say, hi, so-and-so, you know, they'd get to me and I would say, hi, my name's Emerald and I'm an enabler. And people would just stop and they'd look at me, and some people would chuckle, you know, some people that had, you know, some years under their belt in recovery. It's funny, not funny that I was an enabler. And I say that because, you know, earlier I had mentioned that I was probably, you know, I learned that I was just as unhealthy as my brother, if not more. And because I was an enabler, I was probably killing him faster than his addiction was. And so I really had to come to terms with that. And funny enough, when I finally, you know, going back to my brother, when I finally just kind of like, because I was just so involved, I was like, what do you need? You know, every time he went into treatment, I'd buy everything, you know, blankets, sheets, clothes, shoes, toiletries, you know, send him into treatment with all, because that's how I was like, okay, this is how I'm going to show you that I love you. I'm going to drop you off at this treatment facility, but you're going to have everything that you need. You're not going to go in there and need for, and, you know, want or need for anything. And funny enough, he got sober by himself. Like, it wasn't even like anything that I had any part in. When he was ready to get sober, he got sober. And to this day, you know, he's got 2 beautiful boys. He's got 2 beautiful daughters. He's got a great marriage to his wife. And so, you know, just, I think back at those times, like it had nothing to do with me, and I was trying to make it about me. And so, yeah, you know, Al-Anon, there's other self-help programs, you know, adult children of alcoholics. I didn't even know that existed.
I didn't know that either.
That's a thing. It's a self-help group, and they all base their programs on, they have the foundation of Alcoholics Anonymous with the 12 steps and, things like that. And so there's also another self-help, group called Codependent Anonymous, to you know, just highlight those codependent relationships and how unhealthy they can be, and how, you know, when it comes to codependency, we step into that, you know, when it comes to addiction, because those lines are blurred between, you know, when it comes to boundaries, and you know, sometimes there's this like supplemental behavior that comes in to try to make up for what's not happening in the other half of the relationship. And so yeah, Codependent Anonymous, adult children of alcoholics, Al-Anon. Those are all really, really great resources. I think today we have a beautiful gift in the form of Google, and just like, hey, how can I get resources to help my loved one, or how can I learn more about this thing? I always believe knowledge is power, and when we have more knowledge, we're able to make more sound, appropriate, healthier decisions based on, knowledge, just what we know. And the more we know about what something is doing to someone, whether it's drugs or alcohol or, another, working out can be unhealthy. Some people that work out excessively, it can become detrimental to their health, without maybe even realizing it. But when we know more about the things that we're doing, and how they're impacting us, it helps us to make more, healthier decisions.
Growing up, my dad was abusive. I never had the self-confidence to ask questions. I don't know his clans. I can always reach out to his siblings, but I never had the maturity to, I guess, like, man up and ask him questions that I need to know. And then when he was struggling with drugs, and I just left it to my brother and my mom, and I don't think they did very much to discourage him. I do think he found self-help on his own, just because he was pressured by not only his siblings, but our family and my mom's family too. And, but he, just couldn't stop. He'd find drugs and he'd get super paranoid, and my brother would find him and he'd be like in the front of our apartment and in Tempe, and he'd have his hands behind his head, and he'd be telling us like the FBI are coming to arrest him. And the first time I was like, really? Where are they? Like I was clueless because I had no idea. And then it happened again months later, and then he reached out to my Aunt Bernice, his youngest sister, and I guess Bernice brought him out to Gallup somewhere to talk to a medicine man. And I don't think that really did anything for him, because he just went back to, and he was working in construction. I think what he did was he made the blueprint for all the electronics in the building. I think that's what he did on his computer at his job. When he died, I guess there was blueprints that the company needed for a medical building, and they had to halt everything because that was all on his computer, and they didn't have a way to contact the family. And then my mom found it and then just brought it over to the business, and they were like, "Oh, great, we can continue construction."
Oh my gosh!
But yeah, I never had the confidence to. I also believe that I didn't speak as much as a child. It was like things like if we didn't vacuum the house, then my dad would get angry when he'd come home and we were at school. We'd get home and we had to do the dishes, vacuum every single day. I still don't understand that. And if we didn't do things like that, we would get spanked just for like any little thing. And I learned not to. I learned that I didn't know how to be myself around other people as a young kid. I never had friends, and I still don't have any like really close friendships today. I just have my wife and my mom and my cameras, just working away in my little dungeon of a room on my computer. But I also don't have very many conversations besides like, immediate family members. Just texting on my phone. And sometimes I also find that there's words I've never said before. I don't know. I was talking to myself one day. I was like going through like a script in my head, and I was trying to practice it. And I was like, I never had to say this word before. Oh, it was judiciary. I've never had to say that. I don't even know if I said that right. I watched a TikTok, and it was like, name the 3 branches of our government. And it was the judiciary, the executive, and the The third one was
Legislative.
legislate. I've never had to say that before. So I'm always learning something new about myself too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think litigious is a word that I've learned. Yeah.
There you go. Another word I've never said before.
Litigious. And I'm, a lot of these are very, legal oriented terms. So I'm kind of glad I haven't had to use any of these terms, but yeah, litigious is one that I learned in the last year that I was like, I had to write it down and then like look it up.
Do you want to join us?
Yeah. Litigious is a word that I've never heard.
Just put on the headphones.
Do I hear you better?
Yeah.
Yeah, that way we're not
Step into our world.
that way we're not yelling at each other. Good morning.
Good morning.
I don't know if I had the camera on you.
Yeah, I don't think so, but that's
okay.
Yeah. Jinx, pitchfork you, make over you, that's right.
So yesterday last year was
It's my phone.
it looks like my phone. Last year was our first the first powwow that our club had put on for the university. And last year Ashlyn was the ambassador for Flagstaff High School. And so being the great ambassador that she is, she volunteered to help with the cooking for last year's powwow. And so her and the NAU's ambassador, Meredith Talley's mom, and Ashlyn were in the kitchen, in the hot spot on campus, getting all the food ready. Jael and Keisha, who were the president and vice president at the time of the club, were the head staff last year, just so we didn't have to pay anybody. The head staff fee. We didn't have, we had very little money last year. So we didn't have to pay anybody. So we had them step in as head staff. And so, they donated their time. And so, that was our first powwow last year. And, this year the first thing I asked Ashlyn was, can you please help us cook? Cause I did not know how that was going to turn out. Jael and Keisha were not on the head staff this year. So they were, really part of the committee. And so Ashlyn was literally in the kitchen from, what time did we go in there? We got to campus at 8:00 in the morning. When we got into the kitchen at 10, she was, still helping me get stuff together. We got into the kitchen at 10:00, and I think they finally made it to the powwow probably right before dinner break. So a good 6 hours in the kitchen, getting the stews ready for our head staff, our drum groups, our elders. And I think we ended up actually feeding quite a few people, spectators that came to the powwow too. We had over, her little beautiful bread making hands put together, I think 90 pounds of flour to make enough dough for probably 300 pieces of fry bread. And they all whipped that up in the kitchen. So I'm super thankful and just happy that Ashlyn was able to help us out yesterday, which, really made a big difference in what we were able to provide for the community. As a social powwow, we try to put a lot of effort into what we can provide. We made sure our vendors had goodie bags when they checked in, made sure we tried to have refreshments, stuff available for head staff, for the drum groups, snacks and things like that. And so, we hope to just keep expanding every year. And, maybe someday we'll be able to pay Ashlyn for her work.
What goes into having a special?
So really it's just kind of like, who do we want to recognize? It's coming up with an idea. Let's see. For like, if somebody, has a special event coming up, a lot of times people will do requests from the committee, from powwow committees, if they can do a special for, sometimes it's graduation. There's a lot of graduation specials that will happen typically during summer powwows for new graduates, high school graduates, college graduates, just to honor the time that it takes for them to, achieve those accomplishments. But it's just a matter of, reaching out to the committee and just saying, hey, can I have some time for this? So, a family will reach out, request that time. The committee will, say yes or no, that they have, a space in their schedule for that. And then allow the family to do that. When the family comes in, they already have an idea of what they want to do, a contest of some sort. And then, the family is always going to pay back, the committee, the arena, the give thanks for that time, to honor their family, their loved one, for whatever reason. But yeah, it's just coming up with an idea and then requesting that time at a particular powwow, to make that time for the honoring.
And who are all the people that you honor on a typical family special?
I think it just depends. It depends on the family. Ashlyn, we did her special this last weekend at Westwood High School, and her focus. Every powwow that we do, there's kind of always a different focus. I think there was one powwow where we hosted a switch dance special because Jael and Ashlyn sometimes they'll switch regalia, especially when they were younger. When Jael could fit into smaller jingle dresses. You
guys did that at Verona.
They did that at Verona. They've done that at Imperial Beach, I think is where we actually hosted the switch dance special. And that's just in honor of what that means, the switch dancing and just being able to weave between those two worlds and what that means. The particular switch dance this last weekend at Westwood, Ashlyn really wanted to take time to honor her siblings, her brothers, her sister, and the impact that they've had on her life and how important they are to her. And so, we hosted a sibling special where her brothers danced with her. They danced with her in her honor song. And then they danced I think one start for the contest song. But she really wanted to take time to honor her siblings, and that it's just a night coming up with an idea. Sometimes it's we try to come up with something different, something that we haven't seen at a powwow recently, or there was one year Ashlyn was head staff at Sequan. She was a head young girl at Sequan powwow, and we hosted a juniors versus teens fancy shawl spotlight special. Because we had seen spotlight specials, at a lot of different powwows, Apache Gold, Red Mountain. But we hadn't seen one for teens. We had seen them for adult women, fancy, adult men fancy. We hadn't seen any that honor the juniors and teens. And there's a lot of juniors and teens that have a lot of amazing talent, that, are amazing dancers. And so we wanted to honor that. And so, give them time in the spotlight. And so, we just try to figure out who we want to honor. And then when it comes to actually honoring, giving out gifts, I know, we've honored you, at a powwow, this last, when
I think that was Eastern Navajo.
Yeah. Eastern Navajo Fair, at Westwood, my, two of my brothers and my sister were there. And so we had already been planning, I had gotten some shawls together for my brother, his wife, for my sister. And then we had, shout out to Randy Sandoval and her amazing star quilts, and, gotten my brother-in-law and one of my brothers a star quilt, and then gotten a bogard, for my younger brother. But it was really just a time just to thank my siblings, because anytime there's something going on with my kids, my brother Brian, he's the one that a lot of my dad's regalia was passed down to after my dad passed away. He does, anything and everything he can to show up to a powwow that, my kids are head staff at. He's like the gears behind the machine. Like he will like he'll just be dripping sweat, just like, what do you need? You know,
That's
like
my mom.
Yeah. Like he'll just, he'll carry whatever, and he really does a lot of that behind the scenes kind of support. And I'm just always like just super thankful for him. Anytime my brother Roman is there, he'll help too. We're like, hey, go get, these 8 cases of water and bring them over here. I don't want to do that, hard labor. And so my brothers are there. They're always just, ready and willing to help. They bring their boys around. We try to make sure their boys have regalia too. And so, yeah, I just really wanted to honor my siblings because Ashlyn was honoring her siblings, and it was just a great powwow. We always, give back to the arena, try to, honor the drum groups. We try to, make sure we have something for the rest of the head staff, because it's a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort goes into these head staff positions. And my kids have had the honor and the privilege of being on head staff positions, almost since they got into the arena. For the last 6-7 years, I didn't mean to do that. For the last few years, they've been on one of the first head staff positions that I think AJ was in as a head tiny tot boy. We had to oh my gosh, we got to get their initiation going. We had to get them initiated. We did. So, they've been, AJ's been on head staff since he was 3. And at 3 years old, he knew that he had, increased responsibilities, that he had a job to do, and that, he's always kind of carried that responsibility with a lot of, I think, more maturity than I think a lot of people, would give a 3-year-old credit for.
I got to say something really quick. At, I believe it was Verona. Mm-hmm. I was just sitting there filming, and I look over to my left and I see AJ helping some family set up their canopy. I was like, I'm so proud of that kid.
Aw, that's great to hear.
Nobody had to tell him. He just was running around playing. He saw the family needed help, and he just went over there and started helping them.
Yeah. That's the hope that, my kids, I think they're all just kind of wired that way. And yeah, super, always proud of my kids and growing up and, coming up in the arena. I think back to my parents, and I wish, I look at, my dad was born on St. Patrick's Day. His name was Patrick. And
did you call him Patty?
No, never. But he would always, he'd always wear, or he'd walk around like, oh, kiss me, I'm Irish. He'd say stuff like that. And my dad was the most Lakota looking man ever. I don't even, where's that? Can you find that? The picture, I think it's in that box, Ashlyn, the picture of Grandpa, with a bunch of, it had the multi-frame.
Sir.
Thank you. But yeah, my dad was just the most.
You can just move the battery over here on the table.
Lakota looking dude, and he'd be like, "Oh, kiss me, I'm Irish," and things like that. We found out later on that he actually is part Irish. My great grandma, her dad, was part Irish. And so I found that out actually, I think the summer of 24, I found that out, which, kind of is attributed to where my kids get their red hair. My husband is part Irish. And so my kids, fair skin, red hair, freckles, which, made sense to me because I've always wondered where I have freckles too. And, where did I get my freckles? So maybe it's not in there.
You want to pause and go find it?
I'll look for it in a little bit. I'm not sure where it would be. But yeah, so, I think back and I'm like, gosh, I really wish my parents could have met my kids because of, just how, my kids, my nephews, our partners, me and my siblings are partners, just to see, where we are, in life. And then at the same time, I really have this strong tie to spirituality. And in my mind, my parents have already seen my kids, my parents are, we say, you know, they're watching over us. I really, really, really believe that. You know, there's moments that we've had, these spiritual moments that, you know, my kids have experienced, that I've experienced, where we get these little glimpses or these little messages, you know, maybe we would call them. And I really think that my parents know who my kids are. They know who my nephews are, and, you know, our partners and things like that. And so, yeah, I'm so thankful that I have had this foundation, the way of life, you know, in powwow. And, you know, I'm just really glad that I get to share that with my kids, and that they take it on with so much honor and respect for the people, the community, the way of life. And they're not in here to change anything or to do anything different. They want to follow proper protocol, and they want to learn those traditions. You know, we've met families that, you know, we try, you know, have heard, you know, hey, you know, they've been like taught, or, you know, they learned a certain way, and then, you know, another family comes in and they're like, hey, you know, this is the proper way to do that thing, and they disregard it. You know, we've encountered things like that. And I'm just so glad and thankful that my kids are open to teachings. They're open to, you know, learning from other people, and, you know, they have respect for this way of life and where these songs and dances come from. And they want to learn more about that, because, you know, it's part of the responsibility of doing these songs and dances, and is carrying on these things in a proper way, and not changing them, you know, to fit a different narrative. So, yeah.
I know yesterday during the dinner break, that family came up to you, telling you how proud they were of you, the way that you raised your kids, and how your kids are a reflection of who you are and who their dad is.
Yeah, that was really unexpected. I didn't know what to expect when this beautiful couple came down and asked to talk with me, and
I thought it was important that I sit there and I listen, because I felt like I needed to hear what they wanted to say too. I know I needed to leave to go film the Apache Crown dancers, but at the same time I was like, oh, I should sit here and listen to what they had to say to Emerald.
Yeah, you know, I was definitely caught off guard. Like, oh my gosh, like what? And it was just really, really heartwarming to me to hear. I don't follow I've taught my kids enough so that they don't need me. Especially when it comes to being in the arena, you know, outside of maybe braiding Ashlyn's hair and putting on her hair ties, you know, she's really capable of doing everything else for herself. One of the biggest goals that I had when the kids started dancing was for them to be able to get themselves ready. And I remember one of the first times that JL didn't need me to put his roach on for him. And I like almost lost it, because I was like, you know, but that's what the goal was for them to get to a place where they could get themselves ready. Because everyone would ask me like, Emerald, why aren't you dancing? Why aren't you dancing? I'm like, I got 3 kids. I got to get ready. I'm not going to make it in time for grand entry. I got 3 kids. And at one point I had 4 kids, because Adrienne, my oldest daughter, she was dancing fancy shawl for a little bit. So at one point they all had long hair. And so I had 4 heads of hair to braid before grand entry, outfits to tie on, and, you know, just stuff to get ready. And so I didn't have time for me. And so the goal was always to get them to a place where they could do it by themselves. And they've gone to powwows without me. I just have never gone to powwows without them. And so, because they've gotten to this place of just independence for themselves, I'm not always with them like they were when they were younger. And so it's really, really heartwarming to hear that people see my kids for who they are. They're compassionate, they're empathetic, they're respectful, they're just amazing humans. And the way that they carry themselves, I don't think of it as a reflection of me. I think of it as a reflection of my parents, because even to this day, there's people that will come up to Ashlyn and they'll hear her introduction at powwows and they'll say, oh, I knew your grandpa. This is who he was and this is how I knew him. And they'll share stories with my kids about their grandpa, about my dad. And so I don't think of it as a reflection of me. I think of it as a reflection of my parents, because that's really, I think, the connection to the arena. And, for her to sit down, her name is Sue, for Sue to sit down and tell me all of those things, I really had to Emerald, it's okay, to accept these, words of affirmation, these words of encouragement, because I know that her dad and I had, their dad and I had a huge part in raising them. At the same time, their character, that's innately them. The character, those things that they embody, those are innately them. Those are inside of them. And all we can do is nurture those things. It's up to them to continue to cultivate that. So I don't really want to take all the credit in, you did this. You did, because I didn't. At some point in their life, they took over. And they're becoming the people that they're becoming, if that makes sense.
There's that saying, you picked up your kids and you put them down and then you never picked them up again. Oh,
absolutely. I always think about
what it is.
Yeah. I think about that even now with, especially now with AJ, there's times where he'll still sit in my lap. He's 11. He's going to be 12 in a few months, but, he'll sit in my lap and I think about, there's going to be one last time where he's not going to sit in my lap anymore, and there was that, there was that time where the last time that I picked up Ashlyn, she still sits in my lap. So, and she's 17. So I'm not worried about Ashlyn, but there was those times, those last, of the childhood moments, that I definitely cherish, especially now with AJ being our youngest. But yeah, I just, actually, so Sue had came and talked to me at dinner break and just shared some amazing words, her and her partner, just the way that they see Ashlyn and how they've experienced her, and even hearing more about my backstory and trying to get them out here to the reservation, close to the reservation, so that they have some, language immersion and cultural immersion. They were just even more astonished at how well she speaks Navajo and how well she represents herself. And after the powwow, another mom came up to me and says, I don't know if it was last year or the year before at Winslow powwow, her son was actually going through this period of depression and was on the verge of completing suicide, and just kind of had gone to the Winslow powwow and had just come out of a lengthy hospitalization for the son's mental health, and had seen JL dancing, and had really just kind of, how did she explain it? The son just kind of had this experience, this connection to JL and his dancing, and, the way that he carries himself, and recorded him, and is trying, the son now, watches that video of JL and is trying to teach himself how to dance, based on, the way that JL dances, the way that he carries himself, and, a lot of the things that he embodies. And that to me is, that's the goal. when it comes to my kids and getting them in the arena. And I'll post it, on my previous Facebook. I had to reestablish a Facebook account, but on my previous Facebook account,
Because of you.
because of Ashlyn. On my previous, social media posts, I talk about how my kids, we go places and they share their medicine. We come from a very powerful people in South Dakota, in San Felipe Pueblo, and the Navajo people. We come from very powerful people, and I've been told that multiple times, not just by my family, but people who knew my family in Wambly, South Dakota, in San Felipe Pueblo, New Mexico, and my kids they have that medicine. They have that medicine, and when they go out and they share that medicine, the people that are open to receiving those blessings are the ones that take advantage of it. And maybe that's not quite the right word that I want to say, but that benefit from it or are blessed by their medicine, the medicine that they share. The grass dance, it's also, it's a prayer dance. Before powwows, back in the day, the grass dancers would come out and they would flatten the grass and then get the arena ready for everyone to come in. And there's some powwows that we go to. I always try to make sure the boys are ready before grand entry, because there's some powwows that we go to that will still say, we're going to call out all the grass dancers. They're going to bless the arena before we get started. And where did they do that? They did that at a recent one.
They did that at
Star School.
At Star School powwow. We just, because we went to Star School 2 weekends ago.
He was ditching.
Where were you?
I think that was Dobson High School.
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't?
It was not Dobson.
It was after Dobson.
It was after Dobson.
Abster.
It was after Dobson.
Check my schedule. Oh, I was probably at the Aloha Festival.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
that's right.
Okay. It was the Aloha Festival. So we were at Star School. So that was Denver March weekend.
Yeah,
Because,
same weekend.
yeah, we were gonna.
I gave up Denver March this year.
Yeah, we were gonna pack up and we were gonna head out to Denver March, and we decided just to stay home and invest in some of the local powwows. And so I'm glad we did, because we went to Star School. Trevor was the MC. Trevor Foster was the MC there, and he called out all the grass dancers. And so, it's just I recorded it. I think I even posted it on Facebook. That's a prayer dance. I dance jingle, Ashlyn dances jingle. And so we have these prayer dances that we do. So it's powerful. They share their medicine, not just JL, AJ, same way. They have this power and this intensity behind, the things that they do. And they have a deep respect for this way of life and where this stuff comes from. They have these, origin dances and these songs, and they come from different places, and those are the things that they honor. And out of respect.
I had another question, but I completely forgot what it was.
I'm gonna go to the bathroom really quick.
You just want to end it here?
That's up to you.
We can save the conversation for part 2.
Yeah,
It's 11 o'clock.
We didn't really get into any military service. We've just been
I think it was
talking.
enough.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's good
Part
enough.
2 will be military service, guys.
You don't want to know.
Whenever that is, I don't know yet.
Yeah, you don't want to.
She loaded bombs and missiles, and then a few years later, she started talking to people
talking
about ALK
about feelings.
and ALK.
Okay. I want to ask about it, but we'll save that for next time. Thanks for watching. If you want to be a guest here on the podcast, you want me to come to your house, send me an email.
And your address.
Indigenous Event Recordings @gmail.com. And we'll save it for that. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, Jill doesn't say anything. Not even anything the whole time.
Said 2 words.
I gotta pee.